a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Stranger Things. Stranger Things is an American science fiction horror web television series created, written, and directed by the Duffer Brothers and released on Netflix. The Duffer Brothers, Shawn Levy, and Dan Cohen serve as executive producers. The first season, released in July 2016, stars Winona Ryder, David Harbour, Finn Wolfhard, Millie Bobby Brown, Gaten Matarazzo, McLaughlin, Natalia Dyer, Charlie Heaton, Cara Buono, and Matthew Modine, with Noah Schnapp and Keery in recurring roles. For the second season, Schnapp and Keery were cast as series regulars, along with the additions of Sadie Sink, Dacre Montgomery, Sean Astin, and Paul Reiser. Set in the fictional town of Hawkins, Indiana, in the 1980s. The first season focuses on the investigation into the disappearance of a young boy amid supernatural events occurring around the town, including the appearance of a girl with psychokinetic abilities who helps the missing boy's friends in their own search. The second season, titled Stranger Things 2, is set 1 year later, and deals with attempts of the characters to return to normality and consequences that linger from the first season. The Duffer Brothers developed the series as a mix of investigative drama alongside supernatural elements portrayed with childlike sensibilities. They established its time frame in the 1980s and created an homage to the pop culture of that decade. Several themes and directorial aspects were inspired and aesthetically informed by the works of Steven Spielberg, John Carpenter, and Stephen King, among others, including several films, anime and video games. The first season premiered on Netflix on July 15, 2016. It received critical acclaim for its characterization, pacing, atmosphere, acting, soundtrack, directing, writing, and homages to 1980s genre films. The series has received 31 Emmy Award nominations, including for Outstanding Drama Series, 4 Golden Globe Award nominations, and won the Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by an Ensemble in a Drama Series in 2016. On August 31, 2016, Netflix renewed the series for a second season of 9 episodes, which was released on October 27, 2017. In December 2017, Netflix ordered a third season, which began production in April 2018 and will consist of 8 episodes, and is expected to be released in mid-2019. The Duffer Brothers have said that Stranger Things is likely to end after its 4th or 5th season. Premise: Stranger Things is set in the fictional rural town of Hawkins, Indiana, during the early 1980s. The nearby Hawkins National Laboratory ostensibly performs scientific research for the United States Department of Energy, but secretly does experiments into the paranormal and supernatural, including those that involve human test subjects. Inadvertently, they have created a portal to an alternate dimension called the Upside Down. The influence of the Upside Down starts to affect the unknowing residents of Hawkins in calamitous ways. The first season begins in November 1983, when Will Byers is abducted by a creature from the Upside Down. His mother, Joyce, and the town's police chief, Jim Hopper, search for Will. At the same time, a young psychokinetic girl called 11 escapes from the laboratory and assists Will's friends, Mike, Dustin, and Lucas, in their own efforts to find Will. The second season is set a year later, starting in October 1984. Will has been rescued, but few know of the details of the events. When it is discovered that Will is still being influenced by entities from the Upside Down, his friends and family learn there is a larger threat to their universe from the Upside Down. The third season is planned to take place a year later, in mid-1985, in the midst of the popularity of the film Back to the Future. Mike and 11 have developed a relationship, as have Max and Lucas. Season 3. In April 2018, executive producer Shawn Levy stated that, as with the previous 2 seasons, the Duffer Brothers would direct the first 2 episodes, with Levy directing the 3rd and 4th episodes. The other directors for the season have yet to be announced. However, Levy confirmed that Andrew Stanton would not be returning due to scheduling issues. Development. Stranger Things was created by Matt and Ross Duffer, known professionally as the Duffer Brothers. The two had completed writing and producing their 2015 film Heaton, which they had tried to emulate the style of M. Night Shyamalan. However, due to changes at Warner Brothers, its distributor, the film did not see a wide release and the Duffer Brothers were unsure of their future. To their surprise, television producer Donald DeLine approached them, impressed with Heaton's script, and offered them the opportunity to work on episodes of Wayward Pines alongside Shyamalan. The brothers were mentored by Shyamalan during the episode's production, so that when they finished, they felt they were ready to produce their own television series. The Duffer Brothers prepared a script that would essentially be similar to the series' actual pilot episode, along with a 20-page pitch book to help shop the series around for a network. They pitched the story to about 15 cable networks, all of which rejected the script on the basis that they felt a plot centered around children as leading characters would not work, asking them to make it a children's show or to drop the children and focus on Hopper's investigation in the paranormal. In early 2015, Dan Cohen, the VP of 21 Laps Entertainment, brought the script to his colleague Shawn Levy. They subsequently invited the Duffer Brothers to their office and purchased the rights for the series, giving full authorship of it to the brothers. After reading the pilot, the streaming service Netflix purchased the whole season for an undisclosed amount. The show was subsequently announced for a planned 2016 release by Netflix in early April 2015. The Duffer Brothers stated that at the time they had pitched to Netflix, the service had already gotten recognized for its original programming, such as House of Cards and Orange is the New Black, with well-recognized producers behind them, and were ready to start giving upcoming producers like them a chance. The brothers started to write out the series and brought Levy and Cohen in as executive producers to start casting and filming. The series was originally known as Montauk, as the setting of the script was in Montauk, New York and nearby Long Island locations. The brothers had chosen Montauk as it had further Spielberg ties with the film Jaws, where Montauk was used for the fictional setting of Amity Island. After deciding to change the narrative of the series to take place in the fictional town of Hawkins instead, the brothers felt they could now do things to the town, such as placing it under quarantine, that they really could not envision with a real location. With the change in location, they had to come up with a new title for the series under direction from Netflix Ted Sarandos so that they could start marketing it to the public. The brothers started by using a copy of Stephen King's Firestarter novel to consider the title's font and appearance, and came up with a long list of potential alternatives. Stranger Things came about as it sounded similar to another King novel, Needful Things, though Matt noted they still had a lot of heated arguments over this final title. To pitch the series, the Duffer Brothers showcased images, footage and music from 1980s films such as E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Poltergeist, Hellraiser, Stand By Me, Firestarter, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Jaws, in order to establish the tone of the series. With the critical success of the first season after its release in July 2016, speculation on a possible second season was raised. The Duffer Brothers initially intended for Stranger Things to either be a standalone miniseries or an anthology series. They also considered the possibility of setting a potential second season in the early 1990s and featuring an older version of the characters, along with all new characters, who are drawn back to Hawkins after supernatural events begin occurring again. However, following the release of the first season, they realized that the likability of the characters, especially the children, was key to the series' success, and they decided to set the second season in 1984 and focus on the same characters. By the end of July, the Duffer Brothers had outlined a plan for such a season if it was greenlit, and Netflix CEO Reed Hastings said in early August that the company would be dumb not to renew Stranger Things for a second season. On August 31, 2016, Netflix announced it had renewed Stranger Things for a second season of 9 episodes, to be released in 2017. The Duffer Brothers revealed that the series had been renewed for a second season before the first premiered. Regarding the decision to wait more than a month after the first season premiered to announce the renewal, Matt Duffer said, "It actually ended up working, because it had built up to this fever pitch. I guess that's what Netflix were intending to do all the time. The Duffer Brothers wrote the second season to make the combined first and second season feel like a complete work, but setting elements in place to go forward with additional seasons if they are greenlit. While most of the story for the second season had been decided before the first season aired, the Duffer Brothers took in the audience reactions from the first season to adjust some of the details within the second season. They knew they would not have the same element of audience surprise as when the show aired anew, and were aware fans wanted to see certain elements. But Ross said, "The point is not to give everyone what they think they want, because I don't think they really know what they want." The Duffer Brothers felt that the second season should be treated more as a sequel rather than a continuation, and thus have opted to call the second Stranger Things 2. This approach had some trepidation from Netflix, since the company felt movie sequels typically have a bad reputation, but the Duffer Brothers pointed out that there had been many successful sequels that surpassed the original film, and felt confident with this name. Despite revealing episode titles for the season in the announcement teaser in order to provide some hint of where we were going in Season 2 without giving anything away, Matt Duffer stated that some of the titles would change, since there were some things we didn't want to put on there, because we felt like it would give too much away, and because people are smart on the fucking internet, with fan-created videos analyzing the chapter titles right on a lot of how the titles related to the plot of the season. In early October 2017, the Duffer Brothers revealed the final titles for the first 6 episodes of the season. Levy noted in November 2016 that he and the Duffer Brothers had already begun planning a potential third season, saying, "We are not gonna be caught off guard and we don't want to be making stuff up like the day before we have to write it and make it. So we are definitely optimistic and we have started thinking ahead." The Duffer Brothers anticipate having about 4 to 5 seasons to work with, but do want to have a really finite ending, while the show is still at a height of success, according to Matt, rather than letting it draw out indefinitely. In August 2017, the Duffer Brothers confirmed there would be a third season, with the likelihood of one more season following that, with Ross saying, "We're thinking it will be a 4-season thing and then out." However, executive producer Shawn Levy later suggested that either 4 or 5 total seasons were possibilities, claiming that, "The truth is we're definitely going 4 seasons and Therese very much the possibility of a 5th. Beyond that, it becomes I think very unlikely." Matt Duffer later commented that no official decision has been made, claiming that, "It's hard, like 4 seems short, 5 seems long. So I don't know what to do." In December 2017, Netflix officially confirmed that they have greenlit the third season, consisting of 8 episodes. Levy also confirmed that a 4th season was definitely happening, and that there was potential for a 5th season. Writing. The idea of Stranger Things started with how the brothers felt they could take the concept of the 2013 film Prisoners, detailing the moral struggles a father goes through when his daughter is kidnapped, and expand it out over 8 or so hours in a serialized television approach. As they focused on the missing child aspect of the story, they wanted to introduce the idea of childlike sensibilities they could offer, and toyed around with the idea of a monster that could consume humans. The brothers thought the combination of these things was the best thing ever. To introduce this monster into the narrative, they considered bizarre experiments we had read about taking place in the Cold War, such as Project MKUltra, which gave a way to ground the monster's existence in science rather than something spiritual. This also helped them to decide on using 1983 as the time period, as it was a year before the film Red Dawn came out, which focused on Cold War paranoia. Subsequently, they were able to use all their own personal inspirations from the 1980s, the decade they were born, as elements of the series, crafting it in the realm of science fiction and horror. The Duffer Brothers have cited as influence for the show Stephen King novels, films produced by Steven Spielberg, John Carpenter, Wes Craven, Robert Zemeckis, George Lucas and Guillermo del Toro, films such as Alien and Stand By Me, Japanese anime such as Akira and Elfen Lied, and video games such as Silent Hill, The Last of Us, and Dark Souls. The Duffer Brothers also believe that they may have brought influences from other works unintentionally, including Beyond the Black Rainbow and DARYL discovered by reviewing fan feedback on the show. With Netflix as the platform, The Duffer Brothers were not limited to a typical 22-episode format, opting for the 8-episode approach. They had been concerned that a 22-episode season on broadcast television would be difficult to tell a cinematic story with that many episodes. 8 episodes allowed them to give time to characterization in addition to narrative development. If they had less time available, they would have had to remain committed to telling a horror film as soon as the monster was introduced and abandon the characterization. Within the 8 episodes, the brothers aimed to make the first season feel like a big movie, with all the major plot lines completed so that the audience feels satisfied, but left enough unresolved to indicate Terry's a bigger mythology. And Terry's a lot of dangling threads at the end, something that could be explored in further seasons if Netflix opted to create more. Regarding writing for the children characters of the series, the Duffer Brothers considered themselves as outcasts from other students while in high school and thus found it easy to write for Mike and his friends, and particularly for Barb. Joyce was fashioned after Richard Dreyfuss' character Roy Neary in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, as she appears absolutely bonkers to everyone else as she tries to find Will. Other characters, such as Billy in the second season, have more villainous attributes that are not necessarily obvious from the onset. Matt explained that they took further inspiration from Stephen King for these characters, as King always has really great human villains that may be more malicious than the supernatural evil. According to David Harbour, writing for the third season was still occurring in December 2017. Levy said the season would be less about Will, saying, "We're not going to put Will through hell for a third season in a row. He'll be dealing with stuff, but he won't be at rock bottom. We're going to be dealing with forces of evil that are new." David Harbour said that the third season also draws heavily from the film Fletch. Casting. In June 2015, it was announced that Winona Ryder and David Harbour had joined the series as Joyce and as the unnamed chief of police, respectively. The Duffer Brothers casting director Carmen Cuba had suggested Ryder for the role of Joyce, which the two were immediately drawn to, because of her predominance in the films of the 1980s. Levy believed Ryder could rich up the emotional urgency and yet find layers and nuance in different sides of Joyce. Ryder praised that the show's multiple storylines required her to act for Joyce as she's out of her mind, but she's actually kind of onto something, and that the producers had faith she could pull off the difficult role. The Duffer Brothers had been interested in Harbour before, who until Stranger Things primarily had smaller roles as villainous characters, and they felt that he had been waiting too long for this opportunity to play a lead, while Harbour himself was thrilled by the script and the chance to play a broken, flawed, anti-hero character. Additional casting followed 2 months later with Finn Wolfhard as Mike, Millie Bobby Brown in an undisclosed role, Gaten Matarazzo as Dustin, Caleb McLaughlin as Lucas, Natalia Dyer as Nancy, and Charlie Heaton as Jonathan. In September 2015, Cara Buono joined the cast as Karen, followed by Matthew Modine as Martin Brenner a month later. Additional cast who recur for the first season include Noah Schnapp as Will, Shannon Purser as Barbara, Barb Holland, Joe Keery as Steve Harrington, and Ross Partridge as Lonnie, among others. Actors auditioning for the children roles read lines from Stand By Me. The Duffer Brothers estimated they went through about 1,000 different child actors for the roles. They noted that Wolfhard was already a movie buff of the films from the 1980s period and easily filled the role, while they found Matarazzo's audition to be much more authentic than most of the other auditioned apes, and selected him after a single viewing of his auditioned ape. As casting was started immediately after Netflix greenlit the show, and prior to the scripts being fully completed, this allowed some of the actors' takes on the roles to reflect into the script. The casting of the young actors for Will and his friends had been done just after the first script was completed, and subsequent scripts incorporated aspects from these actors. The brothers said Modine provided significant input on the character of Dr. Brenner, whom they had not really fleshed out before, as they considered him the hardest character to write for given his limited appearances within the narrative. In October 2016, it was announced that Schnapp and Keery had been promoted to the main cast for the second season, after each recurring in the first season, and that Sadie Sink and Dacre Montgomery would join the main cast as Max and Billy, respectively. Ryder, Harbour, Wolfhard, Brown, Matarazzo, McLaughlin, Dyer and Heaton also return for the season. Sean Astin as Bob Newby and Paul Reiser as Sam Owens are also part of the main cast in the season. Sean Astin's character, Bob, was originally meant to be a smaller role, but Astin performed his role so well the Duffer Brothers ended up having Bob be a major character, as well as giving him a heroic death. For Owens, the Duffer Brothers had referred to the character in their pitch to Netflix for the season as Paul Reiser, and specifically alluded to Reiser's character Buck in Aliens, with Ross referencing James Cameron's casting choice for that film, saying, "Cameron thought people would inherently trust Reiser, and it would be a twist." Reiser's son was a fan of Stranger Things, and gave his father an early appreciation of the series, so that by when the production called his agent about the role, Reiser was excited for the part. Joining them in recurring roles are Linnea Berthelsen as Carly, 8, and Brett Gelman as Murray Bauman. The third season sees Ryder, Harbour, Wolfhard, Brown, Matarazzo, McLaughlin, Dyer, Heaton, Buono, Schnapp, Sink, Keery and Montgomery return. They are joined by Maya Hawke as Robin. Additional new roles include Cary Elwes as the handsome, slick, and sleazy Mayor Klein, and Jake Busey as Bruce, a reporter for the local newspaper, described as having questionable morals and a sick sense of humor. For the third season, it was reported that several of the cast members would be receiving pay raises. Ryder and Harbour were receiving an increase to $350,000 an episode from $150,000 and $80,000 respectively. Wolfhard, Matarazzo, McLaughlin, and Schnapp were receiving a pay increase to $200,000 an episode and possibly around $250,000, a significant increase from the reported $20,000 they made in Season 1. And Dyer, Heaton, and Keery would be receiving approximately $150,000 an episode. Brown's pay was not disclosed, but was estimated to be a bigger raise than her young counterparts. Some sources suggest she is at least making $250,000, and may be getting possibly between $300,000 and $350,000 per episode. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?